Welcome back. This next video will talk about the fundraising process. So now that we've told you who has the money, the next logical question is, how do you get it? So the broad spectrum of steps are these. First of all, the investors have to become aware of you, of your business. And this is arguably the most difficult and most time-consuming step. This involves a lot of networking, and involves a lot of contacting your friends and your infrastructure, perhaps you're a lawyer, in order to get an audience with a venture capitalist. But at some point, you will attract the attention of either an investor or a VC, and there'll be some kind of initial meetings, some phone conversations, and after a certain period of time, you will have the opportunity to make a presentation. That presentation will normally be about an hour, including Q&A, at which case you'll make your case for funding. Once you've made your presentation, the investor is going to think about whether or not they're going to make the investment. They're going to conduct some due diligence on you personally, on your business, and the competition, the general market that you're in. And if they like what they hear, they're going to form an investment syndicate. By investment syndicate, we mean a set of 2 or more investors who will invest at one time in your company. And the reason that a syndicate is performed rather than a single individual is, 1, to spread the risk out among different investors, but 2, in order to provide an opportunity for multiple investors to provide input and mentorship, if you will, to the startup. If the syndicate likes what they see, you've gone through due diligence, and they want to make an investment, then it's normal for the syndicate to offer what is called a term sheet, or a memo of understanding, to the company, which offers amount of money to be invested and the amount of equity that the investor is purchasing, as well as other terms and conditions like board of directors, liquidation preferences, and participation, which we mentioned previously. That term sheet is non-binding, and you get to go home and think about it, talk to your advisors, and decide whether or not this term sheet makes sense. If you decide that it does make sense, then you go back to your investors and you initiate what we call the closing process, which is when this term sheet, which is only 5 or 6 pages, is converted into very thick sets of documents we call definitive documents or closing documents. And once those definitive documents are signed, then the funding can happen, either as bridge financing or full close or rolling close. By full close, we mean, in the prior case, the venture capital syndicate writes you a check for $6 million. A rolling close means it may come in pieces as you deliver certain milestones. Now, how do you attract the attention of an investor? Well, a useful tool is to have an elevator pitch. And by elevator pitch, we mean a verbal presentation lasting no more than a minute, which is designed to capture the attention of a potential investor. Perhaps you're going to meet an investor at a networking event, a trade show or a conference. You're face-to-face with a key investor, with Mark Zuckerberg, somebody like that. You've got 1 minute. What are you going to say? You should have a tagline. You should talk about the market pain you're addressing and how your particular solution is going to solve that problem. What's the market size you're chasing? Who are you? What's the status of your company? What's the status of your product? Are you just a dream, or does a prototype exist? What's your sustainable advantage? How does the investor know that they're going to get paid back in 5, 6 years? And what are you requesting? I need $1 million to build a prototype. I need $2 million to build a complete website. You have to specify your milestone and the amount of money you're going to request to hit that milestone. Now, your elevator pitch would vary depending on purpose. For example, if you're raising equity, you have one kind of elevator pitch. If you're trying to get somebody to vote a certain way, it's another elevator pitch. If you're trying to hire somebody, if you're trying to borrow money, you need to tailor your elevator pitches to the particular purpose and the audience that you're addressing it to. Now, larger, let's say up from the, or beyond the elevator pitch, you have a written document called an executive summary. It's a maximum of 3 pages, preferably 2 pages, and it's, if you will, a mini business plan. It covers all the topics we talked about previously in the business plan video. What's the problem? What's the product, market, etc. Bullets are fine, but it has to read like a story. And the purpose of the executive summary is to induce the investor to read the full plan or to take a meeting. And the metaphor what we like to use here is as a movie trailer, for example. You have a movie, but to get people to come into the theater, they produce a 1-minute trailer, if you will, which gives you a good synopsis of what's going to go on in the regular movie, and the purpose of which is to induce you to come to the movie. Now, the purpose of the executive summary is to provide enough information so that the investor is willing to take a meeting and or read the full plan or take the next step. Now, investor presentation. This is a very big deal. I mentioned before that investors get thousands of business plans a year. So the firm I was with, we got about 2,000 plans a year. But we could only listen to 20 or 30 presenters per year. So of the 2,000 business plans we got, let's say 40 of them were able to make a presentation. That means you're in the upper 2 percentile of people that can get this far. So this is a very big deal. The presentation should be no more than 10 to 15 slides. You should bring samples and visual aids. You should make a compelling personal and video and visual case of why the investor should invest in your company. You're going to have an hour, including Q&A. You should be very clear about what you're going to do with the money and how much money you need. And of course, you should have all your contact information on your presentation. And above all, you got to rehearse. You have this one chance to make a pitch to an investor. You got to make sure the pitch is relatively tight. There are 4 reasons to rehearse. Reason number 1 is to make sure your content is right. Reason number 2 is to make sure your timing is right. If you have 20 minutes to present, take 20 minutes, not 21. The reason number 3 to rehearse is to rehearse for Q&A. You should anticipate questions. You should have backup slides that answer those questions. And you should practice some of these hostile questions perhaps in front of an audience, if you will, that will help you prepare for the final presentation. And the 4th reason to rehearse is for spontaneity, for control, so that you're not reading off of notes and sounding very stiff when you're making the presentation. You have to sound convincing. After you make the presentations, in all probability, you're not going to get the money. So you should ask for feedback. You know, what about the presentation could be improved? Was there some element of content or some element of packaging which should be improved? When an investor says no, you should ask why. Okay, let's talk about due diligence. Due diligence is the process by which investors check your references, they talk to customers and prospects. They want to know more about you, your company, your industry, your market. And so they're going to do some checking. In many cases, you're going to give them references. They'll ask for references. But very often, your investors, or potential investors, will not call those references because they know that perhaps that you've prepped those references prior to their calling you. So they're going to call what I call off-sheet references. That is, people who are similar to the people that you've put on your reference list, but are not those people, so they can get a more candid appraisal of either you, your customer, or your prospects. They'll take a look at your competitors. They'll possibly do a background check to see if there's any criminal issues here. They'll talk to other investors that have invested in you previously. If you already have investors, let's say they're doing a Series A round, but there's an angel round that preceded them, then they'll call them up. And they'll ask for professional services support, such as your accountant, your lawyers, people you do business with. But the best source of diligence that investors are going to look for is somebody that you and the investor know in common. So if the investment opportunity came by way of referral, that would the referral source is a very good way to vouch for who you are. Now, let's talk about term sheets. Term sheets means you're almost there. A term sheet is a non-binding letter of intent or a non-binding memo of understanding that outlines the terms of the deal. These are rare. It's tough to get a term sheet. Like I say, only 2% of potential companies even get an audience. And if you get an audience, your chance of getting a term sheet are less than 50-50. The term sheet specifies the amount of money going in and the conditions under which you will be surrendering capital, equity in that company. So it says $6 million for a third of the company, plus a certain number of board seats, plus liquidation preferences, etc. The term sheet itself is on the order of 5 to 6 pages. Now, question always comes up, should you use a lawyer in negotiating a term sheet? Well, keep in mind that the term sheet is non-binding. And so there's no legal consequence for you to sign this thing and walk away. They can't necessarily sue you. However, if you're uncomfortable with the language and the jargon and the concepts of a term sheet, then it may be useful for you to have a lawyer review the term sheet as you get it. But for most of the students we have in class here, if you're knowledgeable about the terminology, then you can negotiate a term sheet without a lawyer. However, once the term sheet has been signed by both parties, by the investor and the company, then you do need a lawyer. You do need a lawyer to create these closing documents. Closing documents like articles of incorporation that you file with the government, either the state or if you're outside the United States, perhaps there's some business authority that you need to file these papers with. Stock purchase agreement. This outlines the rights of the shareholders. Maybe some voting rights. Maybe a co-sale agreement. That is, under which conditions are you able to sell, are some of your employees able to sell stock in the company? Stock option agreement. This is an incentive program that would be signed by your employees to get stock options. That needs a separate contract. Employee agreements. You're going to hire people. Typically, you're going to need a contract between the company and your employees outlining salary and duties, what happens upon termination, trade secrets, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of lawyering that needs to happen after the term sheet is signed, and at that time you should be prepared to pay quite a bit of money for that. So fundraising is a structured process. There's a language, there's a sequence of events here, and in order to have a successful fundraise, you should know the language and should know the sequencing of events. Packaging is very important. The elevator pitch, the executive summary, your PowerPoint presentation, and above all, you. This all comes in a package that has to be a credible, convincing package for you to attract capital. Now, that is just the process. That's the mechanics of how to raise money from angels and VCs. Our next presentation will give you perhaps some tips on how to improve your chances of raising money in that process.